Hello friends of the Teeworlds, your favorite host is the Green Dragon is presenting you another episode of Teeworlds Coding. Today it's again about chat commands on the server side, but this time we do it the good style, 0.7 autocomplete supporting argument supporting way. So far the whole series has been supporting the ddnet codebase and the vanilla codebase pretty much equally. Like, I'm currently working on the 0.7 vanilla source code, but you could follow with the ddnet code base easily so far, but not today. Today is 0.7 only, and the DDoS network chat command system I will probably cover somewhere in the next 10 years if I do a ddnet coding series, but for now it's vanilla only. So if you're working on a 0.7 vanilla server, you're good to go. This is the way you should code your command system. If you're on a ddnet code base, they will probably not adjust it to this system anytime soon or ever, so then you can skip this episode. All right, let's go. Let's see if it still builds, and let's open the code. Right. So today we are not going to look into the game context, but into the game controller. So recap, as it says here, Control P, go to file. Control P, we type in game controller, and it's located under game server game controller. I'm already at the bottom of the file, so make sure you scroll to the bottom, and here we can see some comments, and those are in here by the nice developers of Teeworlds, who placed in some example commands, even though the Teeworlds server does not have any commands. Here's how you would do it if you want to do it in your modification. So that's very nice. Right, I don't know if I explained comments, but you have multi-line comments starting with a slash followed by a star, and then you can type as much comment as you want, and you close it with a star and a slash. Wonderful, as opposed to a single line comment which ends here, so you can see by the colored highlighting that this is not a comment anymore. Wonderful. Okay, so let's uncomment this command. So we want to comment it at the start here, and uncomment this boy here, and also this single line comment here. Okay, so let's have a look. It's pretty similar to the recon command system, and yeah, so we have this register function here which registers all the commands and gives the actual command that the user has to type, and then you have the description of the command, the parameters, the callback function, and a reference to the current instance of the game controller. Yeah, I will quickly explain that. If you don't want to understand that, or if it confuses you, just ignore it, but let me drop in some more advanced concepts here, since we are already progressing a bit into the series. Okay. We also have the definition of this method in Gamecontroller.h. So go to game server Gamecontroller.h and scroll to the bottom again. We can see this is also commented out. We definitely want to uncomment that, otherwise it won't compile. Maybe. Let me show you the error message so you can learn like a bit of debugging. It's also a valuable skill. So if we now try to compile the code, it says error, no declaration matches, void iGameController com example. Okay, if you see something like no declaration matches, you get the line, so it's in game controller line 1207, so we go to game controller CPP line 1207, that's here. So it says no declaration matches this function, or however it says no declaration matches. Okay, it didn't even say function, but this function is never defined. So we have to declare it first in the header, and that's what this error message is trying to tell you. So I hope next time you see this error message, you know what to do. You have to define it in the header first. So uncomment it here, and now we can try. And it's building, wonderful. So let's get right into some crazy concepts. As you can see, this is prefixed with a static, and this static keyword means it's kind of detached from the instance of the Gamecontroller class, if that makes any sense to you. Since I didn't cover like basics of object-oriented programming, this doesn't make any sense to you, so that's wonderful. Anyways, so normally like all these other methods here have access to like all the instance variables of this Gamecontroller class. So you have a class can hold methods and variables, and all these methods can access those variables. So far so good, right? And if you make a method static, it can't do that anymore. Yeah, that's pretty sad. But it then can do other stuff. So you can pass it as a function pointer, or actually I don't know why they make it static. It has some reasoning. It gives you other advantages. I don't even know them. Why am I even explaining this? Anyways, so this is a static function, which means you don't even you can't even call these other methods here. So for example, if we go into register chat commands, which is a non-static but virtual, but we can ignore that, but it's like somewhat a normal method of the game controller, we can call other methods in here. For example, get start team, we can do that here. We can do get start team, since it's also defined in the game controller. And that one compiles fine, right? But if we go up here into the static method and we call get start team, we get an error message, and it says cannot call member function without object. So that means you need an instance, like an object of the game controller class, to call the member functions of it. But since this is a static function, it is not really tied to any member of it. Okay, so this limits us in our possibility of using the other code, like from the game controller, and we definitely want to do that. And that's why in this line we pass in this, which is a special keyword, and it's a pointer to the current instance of this class. And then we put that into p context as a void pointer, so it could point to anything. Then we do some casting magic and save it in p self. So that means that the variable p self now holds a reference to the game controller. And then we can access it again. So we can do p self and then do get start team, and this will work. So all the stuff that throws an error message that says like cannot call member function without object, you can fix by prefixing it with p self. If that didn't make any sense, just follow along. I just want to sprinkle in some details since we are already advanced in the series here. Cool. Right. Okay, so let's read the code. We already covered that line. The command is called test. It has a description. It takes one string. It can include spaces. So that's what the R stands for, as opposed to the S, which will be delimited by spaces. Right, and then it will call back this function here. And what this function does, it takes the pointer to the current instance of the game controller, converts it, like casts it to a game controller pointer, because it was a void pointer. So the void pointer does not know which type it points to, and that's why you have to cast it. And in this line we have the actual content of our example command, so to say. So we want to access the game server, and since that's a method of the game controller, we have to use p self. The game server, we can control click that or hover over it and see it's like a pointer to game context, which is the file we covered in the last episode. And this file or class includes the method send broadcast, and that's why we need a pointer to it, because the game controller does not directly have the method send broadcast exposed. It's encapsulated in the game server. That's why we need this pointer step here. Anyways, also a familiar method. It takes 2 arguments, first one being some text and the second one being a recipient client ID. Okay, cool. And in our case, we use pResult getString0 as the text. And that's like the same as it works in the recon commands. So getString0 gives you the first string defined by the parameters down here. And it only takes 1 string as an argument. So that's all the arguments you have. So if one types in /test and then space some text, this some text will be stored in this variable and we are going to broadcast that. The receiving client ID is -1, which is not a valid client ID, and it's a special client ID. So as you remember, the client IDs go from 0 to 64, and -1 is a special client ID. When it comes to the recipient, it means everybody. So it will send a broadcast message to everybody with the text you chose. So it's essentially like the broadcast recon command, but it's called test and it's in the chat and everybody can use it. Let's see if it works the way we think it works. I think I already built it, but whatever. Let's run the server and run a client. And if we now type in /test, you can see it's appearing in the autocompletion down here, which is wonderful because that's already covered by the chat command system. It's sending this description, the command, and the parameters to the client, which then renders it if you type in a /. Isn't that neat? So I can also press the tab key to autocomplete it. Wonderful. And here I can type in foobar, bass, whatever. And as you can see down here, we have the text printed foobar bass as a broadcast message. So that's working wonderful. Nice. Okay, so let's add our own command. And I thought about creating a chat command featuring some numbers because we were working with text and strings so much. So let's do some number things. And what's a simple command with numbers? We can do some addition. All right, a quick VS Code shortcut. You can click on a line and press Ctrl C and Ctrl V without marking the whole line. You can just put your cursor somewhere. That's pretty neat if you want to duplicate lines. Cool. And then we call the method add, and we also want to define it in here. We can copy the whole example code because we are pretty much reusing all of it, but we want to change the name to add. This code stays the same and this line goes away. This is where our logic comes in. And then we want to define the registration of the command. So we do the same thing again here, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and we call the command add. And a description would be quick maps without an A, wonderful. And I kind of destroyed something here, yeah, like this. And the argument won't be like one long as string with spaces, but it will be a integer and another integer because we can add 2 numbers with this command. Exciting times. And the callback will be this function up here. We also pass in this, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so let's get right into it. We want to send a chat message to the user displaying those 2 numbers and their added value. So we want to do it in this format, like number 1 plus number 2 equals sum. We want to print that to the user. How do we do that? We need to format a string with our favorite string format method. And for that we need a buffer first. How long do we want it to be? Let's put it at what? yeah, this length, whatever. It just has to be long enough to hold all the numbers that you want to put in there. So 64 is probably also sufficient, depending on how long you want your numbers to be, whatever. Let's go right into it. We want to do string format, and as you can remember, it takes the buffer as the first argument, the size as the second argument, and then we have the format specifier, the format string, and then it includes the format specifiers, %d plus %d equals %d. So this whole format string will look at all these percentages and replace them with whatever they are. So they are digits, and that's why these three things will be replaced by integers that we now have to pass in as arguments. Okay, so what's the first argument we want to put in there? It's the number the user entered, and that's stored in p result, similar to the string the user entered. We want the integer the user entered, so we do get integer, 0 being the first integer the user entered, and we want to add that to the second integer. And then this line is getting a bit long, so we can do some line breaks here. That's totally legal syntax. You can replace spaces with line breaks in most of the cases in C++, so that's pretty nice. And then we want to do a addition in here. Okay, so what's happening here? This is the format string, and it looks at the string and says, oh, there's a %d, so I expect as a next parameter a integer, and then I will replace whatever is in this variable and put it in here. So this is the first number the user provided as an argument to the add command. This is the second number. The second number will go into the second %d, and then in here we take the first number, we add it to the second number, and the result of this whole thing will go into here. Cool. And then we want to send this not as a broadcast, but as a chat message. So how do we do that? We are using send chat, but send chat is not defined in this static Gamecontroller method. So we have to use pself to go to game server, and game server then will send chat. So it's pretty much the same as up here. You can always steal code and just adjust it to your needs in the Teeworlds code base. There's usually something similar written to what you want to do already, so that's pretty neat. Anyways, so what does send chat take as an argument? The first one being the person who sent the message. We use a invalid client ID again, which is -1, and if it's the sender, it will be sent as the server, not as everybody, like sender versus recipient. The magic number -1 as a sender will mean it's coming from the server. The number -1 as a recipient will mean everybody will receive it. So keep those two kind of concepts separate. And the mode will be chat all, so we send it to everybody. Not everybody, we are sending it to the public chat, not like team chat or whisper. That's what it means. And the recipient, we don't want to send it to everybody. If we would want to send it to everybody, we would use -1. That also works. But I want to send it to only one person, and the person being the one who executed the command. And this client ID we can get out of this variable here, the p command context. In this variable p command context, we have the variable m_client ID. And then as a last argument, we have the text that we want to send, so we use a buff. Okay, let it sink in for a second. That's a lot of code, I would say. But yeah, let's dive right into it. I hope it works. So we are going to recompile the server, run the server, and then see what it does. So if I type in now / we can see down here we have our test and now the command add, and it takes two numbers. These two numbers in the greater than and less than are generated by this boy here. Since it's expecting to take two integers, it would automatically create this for us. Isn't that nice? And then it also puts our description there, quick maths. Okay, so let's do it. We do just /add without any arguments, and it doesn't even let me send it. That's so wonderful, because we have full client support here. The client knows what the arguments should be. So we have to type in two numbers. So let's type in two numbers, 8 and 9, and then we get the result 8 plus 9 equals 17. Isn't that great? Yeah, so that's today's episode, covering the basics of a more sophisticated 0.7 command system. I hope you learned something. See you next week.